Hey folks, Steve here with another NATO, the Cold War Goes Hot video for you today. In this video, we're going to start the Baltic approaches scenario, the BALTAP introductory scenario in the box. So this is the smallest scenario to be played in the game. And we're just getting started here. So I'm changing the camera angle here because we're just focused on the north part of the maps. Or I guess it's just the one map. Maybe I could have just set up one map. That could have been easier, but since I'm going to be playing a lot more than that, it's going to be a little weird for me. I'm maybe a foot away from the camera, behind it, trying to lean forward and talk. When I'm moving stuff around, I'm going to be like over here, standing and moving things. But just so we are all looking at the same angle, here we be. Now I've done one thing just for my own ease and for your visibility. Ordinarily, this scenario starts with a great several sets of units in the Warsaw Pact Strategic Reserve box. I've gone ahead and just placed them up here, parked in the Baltic, or off the coast of Germany and Poland, just so you can see them and know that yes, they are indeed there, and they're going to be a factor. The Warsaw Pact player, Soviet player, is going to be deploying these units from the Strategic Reserve as a part of our amphibious invasions and the operations against Denmark. Now, the setup here for NATO is pretty static. So we have these gray units. These are West German units that start near Hamburg and Kiel, Lubeck, and they're set up just there. There's an HQ available. There's this armored unit. There's some mechanized units. I believe they're all hard. Let me double check that. Yeah, they're all considered hard units. Um, and then the rest of the Allied units, at least for the time being, are all of these Danish units up north, and you can see they're pretty spread out. There are a bunch of infantry, mechanized infantry hard unit brigades scattered across Denmark. So there's a concentration in Copenhagen, the capital, and that includes an HQ, a Danish HQ. And then you have these scattering of other units. And just looking at the map situation, talking about the strategic overall, perspective here, it does unfortunately feel incredibly exposed. There's so much coastline, and obviously the Warsaw Pact player can't mess around. They need to make their landings, they need to make their attacks and take cities. But I look at it and I'm just like, oh man, there's not a lot of units to cover what feels like a lot of coastline, a lot of terrain. Not sure how much that will really hurt us, but it's something I'm thinking about saying, oh gosh, this feels like it might be hard to defend depending on where the Warsaw Pact player part of my brain decides to go. Now, there's a bunch of units that start within 2 hexes of Schwerin, and I haven't quite decided that setup, but I wanted to show you that situation so we could, very likely just have a lot of these guys up on the border here, and they will go in. I got to be a little picky about how I want to set up, and the play order may determine, do I keep even a Warsaw Pact unit in reserve to make some kind of breakthrough? I'm not sure yet. I got to kind of untangle the operational finesse required here, but. For the Warsaw Pact, their objective here is to conquer Denmark. That's really the objective. They can do this by taking Copenhagen and a couple of other cities, or if they don't take Copenhagen, they have to take several more other cities in Denmark. So that kind of puts us into this position where we need to decide: are we going to take the capital and a little bit more and conquer Denmark, or are we going to do a broader non-capital approach to conquering Denmark? And that will lead us to deciding, where else to put our units, where to focus effort. And I'm not sure which is the winning strategy here. I mean, trying to go for one place that's worth the equivalent of multiple minor cities in the capital. So, right, you get the capital that's technically not as many other cities, but it's going to be a harder one to get. But if you can concentrate your firepower in a particular area that still might be more bang for your buck. So I'm leaning right now on the Copenhagen strategy, um, as the Warsaw Pact, and we have 7 turns, 7 days. Each day is a turn to capture Copenhagen and those extra cities. If we fail, we lose, and so for the NATO side, all we really need to do is try to keep the Warsaw Pact from succeeding. So this actually kind of makes for a pretty decent solitaire scenario, because one side clearly has the offensive sort of task, and at best, as the defender, you're just trying to disrupt or stop them, um, and there's really no room for counteroffensive. So you can kind of, as the solitaire player, put your head in the Warsaw Pact and then just try to defend as much as possible as the NATO player. So this works out perfectly for my current game state. We don't have to worry about things like supply as the Warsaw Pact, so that's going to be different than most of the other scenarios in the game, where the Soviets really care about their supply and the amount of supply that they have, which tends to run out. We don't need to worry about that here, which is good. We do have some chemical munitions points that we could use, though there may be some cost. Well, maybe there won't be cost to that. I don't know. I think we can use one per turn. And if there's no strategic consequence because of the shortened, smaller scope scenario, maybe we're incentivized to use chemical weapons. That might not be so good for NATO. And in terms of our lift capacity, the Warsaw Pact has 3 sea lift capacity. We have 1 helicopter and 3 air, so we have quite a lot. And the NATO player only has 2 sea lift, 1 helicopter, 1 airlift, and that's mostly, I think, going to be used by NATO to just reposition their forces. The Soviets are going to be using theirs to deploy these units from the strategic reserve. And you can see, I mean, this unit, it might be kind of hard to see from far away. Let's see if I can get the. He's a Marine mechanized unit. We have a couple more like that, along with the Marine HQ. So you can imagine, gee whiz, I wonder how we're going to move those units, probably via sea lift. Then we've got a number of these sort of mechanized paratrooper forces, regiments. And then we've got this whole airborne brigade also, though it's not as punchy as some of these other units. And so you can imagine we're probably going to be using helicopters and airlift to get those guys onto the map and get them situated in our offensive. So, I don't think there'll be, too complex of a decision of how to use our lift capacity. It's going to be getting these units into the front, and then having probably these forces down here try to make that push to grab some of these cities up here, I guess. I don't know. That's probably what it's going to be. What else? Let's see. There's not going to be much in the way of air power, so each side is going to get a tactical air point, which is, not, it'll help. It'll be a factor, but it won't be a huge one. No operational air points, so it should be a pretty straightforward play. And then each side gets to pick one turn where they get 2 air points instead, and you could kind of look at that as a major concentration of air power, air effort. The strategic context here is that if the Warsaw Pact succeeds, then in the very early phases of the armed conflict, they're able to get some subs through on into the North Sea and beyond to disrupt NATO, shipping, transportation, all that kind of stuff. So there is an implication here. It's like, what matters? Well, we, as NATO, you don't want those Soviet subs getting through and causing all that disruption. And the longer you can hold out against the Warsaw Pact, the better positioned NATO would be to kind of, keep those subs bottled up. I guess. I mean, I'm probably grossly simplifying the parameters there, but that's why this scenario would matter. And even if you're playing probably in one of the bigger campaign games in the box, this is still, a front that would matter to you to some degree, I would think. Now, granted, it's funny, even in a bigger campaign, this part of the map is really the only part of the map that you would be worried about doing sea lift stuff on, right? So for all the bits where we're going to need to use our sea lift capability and amphibious rules and all that, this is kind of the only place it'll matter in a bigger campaign anyway, because the rest of the map, it largely speaking is just the land stuff and some rivers, but mostly land concerns at that point. So, and the rivers don't quite aren't super interactive. So, uh, interesting how that's going to work. So anyway, that's kind of the setup here, guys. Just the very broad beginning piece of the puzzle on how we're going to get started with the 7-turn campaign. We're probably going to use the rest of this video to kind of walk through very slowly the first turn, or maybe even the first parts of the first turn, and actually get set up properly at where we want our Warsaw units, Warsaw Pact units to set up. But we'll work it through, and then maybe we'll get into a rhythm where I try to cover a couple turns in a video. So this whole Baltic approaches playthrough should be maybe 3 to 4 videos, or maybe a little more, and then we'll start shifting into some of the bigger scenarios, which might be a little more interesting for folks if they've already played the Baltic approaches scenario or seen it played for that matter. So yeah, okay. So let me get situated here. Okay, so with this next bit here, I just want to talk. You'll notice I've moved some units already. This is still pre-game, so technically we had to do our Warsaw Pact setup, and I've arrayed their forces like this. I've left this unit here behind the enemy lines. Now there is this concept of coordination, and at some point soon, the addition, or rather maybe the replacement is the better word, our operating HQ is going to go away eventually as the Warsaw Pact. The NEGF, Northeast German Forces, I can't remember what that stands for at this moment. Silly of me to even bring it up. But that HQ is going to go away eventually, and we're going to get a different HQ as a reinforcement. And then that kind of opens up our sort of operational capability. There's a bunch of special rules around Baltic HQ and the Baltic Core HQ. And generally, it should just mean, just to summarize it, you can read the book, rule book as you desire, that these guys can work together and fight, as we get into Denmark proper and we get into that zone, that HQ will arrive, and then I can just focus on execution. But I love this guy behind the line, this Baltic Core unit, and he's going to, or Baltic Command unit perhaps, he's going to stay behind, and what I'm probably going to do is put him under an OMG marker, not oh my god, like the kids these days texting, but it's Operational Movement Group, I think. It's basically a reserve, and if you're familiar with the OCS system, it's not too terribly far in terms of mechanics there, where you can use a little bit of their movement and then stick them in a reserve format or mode, I guess, and that will enable them to move later. Now, they won't get to attack and do a bunch of stuff, but it can be really useful. So I'm going to try to set him up to do that, maybe experiment with that mechanic. So that was sort of the thing we had to do next, right? We had to actually deploy these units in the setup. After setup comes a special rule called movement to GDP, which is not gross domestic product, but general defense plan. So the German units got a die roll worth of movement, not the Danish, but the Germans could roll a die. They'll get some movement points to use, and honestly, I mean, I don't know what else to do with them. You can't move further away from the Iron Curtain border. I tried. I would have liked to have, I guess, moved them further away or up towards Flensburg, where the terrain is less open, but we didn't really have that option. So we have an HQ that moved into Kiel. We moved these guys up. This guy's sitting in Lübeck. And I think that's the best that they can do, quite honestly. There's not much more I can imagine worth accomplishing at this point. So again, the victory conditions here are all about conquering Denmark. So how do we do that? And the basic strategy is going to be either capture Copenhagen up here, and two more Danish cities, which looking around the map, there's some all around up in here. If you capture Copenhagen, you just need two more cities. If you don't capture Copenhagen, you're going to need four. And let's see, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Um, so it really depends on your axis of advance here. So you could maybe concentrate some strength and focus on maybe capturing that that minor city, but the majority over here, you're really going to have to focus effort using these land forces down south. So that's kind of the calculus here. Now there will be a whole bunch of NATO reinforcements that will come in these red triangle spots. These are sort of territorial reinforcement locations, and the Danish are going to get a whole boatload of those. Though they're not terribly strong units; they're really just there for defense. Um, so it just means that wherever we get with the Warsaw Pact, there will be a bunch of Danish reinforcements that can make it more and more difficult to capture those minor cities. So as the Warsaw Pact, we want to crush the German line of defense, start heading north, try to get as far as we can get as possible, and then whatever we've done with our sort of, we'll say irregular forces, either Copenhagen or other landings in the north, are the kind of the other pincer move. Now, I've seen in other videos and other demonstrations, and even in the examples of play in the rulebook, an effort to go after Copenhagen, which feels a little boring to try even because so many other examples of play that one could look up involves doing that. But I have to admit, it's much more interesting to capture the capital than to capture everything but the capital. So I feel myself drawn to that choice. Maybe it's high risk, high payoff kind of deal, but certainly you want the capital, right? How else would you conquer a country without capturing its capital? So I do feel like the Warsaw player, half of my brain in this playthrough will be for that. So the Baltic approaches, capturing kind of the biggest city on map for that location feels like the right move. Okay. A couple of things also to note. They're all, for some reason, this is the funny thing. The Baltic approaches scenario, this BALTAP scenario, is one that is the beginner scenario. It also happens to involve the most degree of special rules. So these HQs here, this one, and then there's one near Copenhagen. Those are useful for the NATO forces in general. They have some rules where they can provide, tracing benefits and HQ benefits kind of broadly. So while I guess in a full campaign that would be useful, a lot of these things feel like they're really tied to the unique geography of Denmark and its kind of place in the NATO defense scheme. And I'm not going to try to reiterate the entire rule book. You can read the rule book if you would like. This is not necessarily a how to play series, other than a playthrough to give you a sense of the way that this is going to work. There are certainly better videos out there for learning to play, so please do not look at this as one of those. Anyway, so what are we going to do? All right, well, let's get through the joint player turn. So we talked about the sequence of play in this game, that this is, bread and butter stuff. Each game turn, we do start on turn 1 here and can go up to turn 7, up through turn 7, is a joint player turn. Now, this is pretty straightforward stuff. In here, you would get your reinforcements. You'd also reset your commands and their recovery boxes. So if you used kind of your special command, lift commands, they would recover at the beginning of a turn. Now, obviously, on turn 1, we don't really have any units in that state, so we don't worry about that. There's no reinforcements. This is game turn 1, and there happens to be no reinforcements on game turn 1. So we just get right into the Warsaw player turn. And so now we start to run through an exhaustive sequence of play. The actual sequence of play in the book spans multiple pages. It's really not that complicated, but it is detailed in explanation in the book so that you don't go off the rails. You can stay pretty well synced up with what you're supposed to be doing at each game stage. There is a lot of interactivity here of different things that can happen. Despite the rulebook being 87 pages, and it did take some reading to get through it all, I did find a lot of that page count is driven by the text size, the font size, the usage of the formatting of the rules, where ideas are conveyed in little mini paragraphs with character returns in between. If that was conveyed in more paragraph format, maybe that would have saved them on page count. But make no mistake, there's a lot of different game elements here, different mechanics that all come together in a really interesting simulation of sort of modern warfare at this scale. I don't think it's a huge amount of rules. It's just you take your time to get through it. So for the Warsaw player turn, we're going to do the Warsaw Pact HQ supply phase. Well, here's the good news. There's going to be no real concern for HQ supply because we are still technically all in Warsaw Pact territory, including our reserve box, which is where these units are, remember? And our HQ doesn't have anything that would inhibit him from being able to get supply and provide supply to units. There's also a mechanic here in other scenarios after turn 7. The Warsaw Pact player starts to run low on stored ammunition and supplies, and you have to deal with a supply sort of point expenditure mechanic. Here, we don't need to worry about that. But just know that, at the beginning of a turn, you've got to worry about your HQs and whether or not they can get supply. Next, we have the movement segment, the movement phase, I should say, where we have a movement supply. So we're checking all units for supply. They're all good to go. So no worries there. We have rail movement, and right now there's no real units for us to be concerned with for rail movement. That will change in turn 2, I believe, but for the moment, we're not going to worry about moving anybody by train. We're going to be using the operational combat movement and all that good stuff here in a second. Combat movement's not really a term, so that's my mistake, sorry. Okay, so we get past rail movement, we get to air and sea movement. So now this is where we're going to have some things happening. This is the important part of the game. So what I need to do now as the Warsaw player is designate what lift commands I'm using and where they're going. And if they're going to be near each other, meaning if any single deployment is going to be within a couple of hexes of that location, if I plan to do that, I have to designate them all at once before resolving them, so that I can't do a thing of like, I'm going to try with this guy, oh, he fails, I'm going to try again. No, I have to really commit my target zone and send my units, thusly. So what do I have at my disposal? Well, the big ones, or perhaps the most important ones, are going to be 3 airlift commands and 3 sea commands. And if you want to try to make sense of some of this, you can see, we have, let's see if I can find the, okay, these guys are functionally the same. For the air commands, we have airborne troops that we can use, we probably want to use. And then for the amphibious sea lift, we have some of these Marine brigades, and then we have the Baltic Corps HQ, which is our sort of supply head guy for this expeditionary force. So we can use all of our lift commands here. We have one more helicopter command that I'm going to hold back for now, because I don't feel I have a good place to use it yet. Well, maybe that's not true. might need to actually think about this, because I wonder if I could stick somebody behind these guys, would that work? And then what would that enable us to do? That could really help us if I did it. So I can now I'm wondering. Now I'm like, okay, well, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's my mistake, guys. Helicopter movement is not during this phase. And in fact, it is after ground movement. So technically, I don't need to worry about it right now. I can figure that out. I'll probably do a cut. Okay, so now we got to do this, right? So the idea here, and this is kind of how the example in the book seems to indicate you want to do this, is you stick these guys up here, and the idea will be that they're going to land on that beach northeast of Copenhagen. And then likewise, we have our planes dropping off like so right there. And then what we'll end up with, and this is sort of the strategic planning element here, our goal will be to launch an attack on the city itself and ideally take it. So our idea, getting on both sides of the city, that's going to lead to benefits. So when you're trying to learn this, I do recommend reading the whole rules, because you do need to understand. You don't just move and then see where you're at and try your combats. You really want to think about, where are the combats you want to have happen? What hexes do you need to take? What things do you want to do? And really set up your movement to get you there. Right now, this is basic. It's like Wargaming 101. But in this system, you really, really do need to think about it, because you have all these additional tools in your arsenal, like helicopter movement, like attack helicopters, which we're not going to deal with a whole lot here in this scenario. But in the full campaign, there are a great number of tools in our arsenal that can make a pretty big difference. And things like even chemical warfare. So understanding all the tools at your disposal and how you're going to weave them together to achieve your operational objective is probably, I think, the biggest part of the game. Here, our main choice is just, okay, where are we going to use these lift commands? Where are we going to send these forces? I could, again, alternatively, try to send them at different areas of the map, different minor cities even. I could concentrate on maybe trying to capture several other minor cities over here because they're weaker, and have a greater chance at doing it. But for the time we have, we're going to go big, or I guess go home. So these guys are set up to land, but that's not the end of the story, mind you. So what we're doing is considered, for the amphibious folks, this is, what's the terminology that the game wants to use here? It's obviously an amphibious invasion, as we would understand it. But let's see, yeah, amphibious operation. And for air, we would call this a paradrop operation. So that's the distinction. In the rules, you'll find, like, yeah, you can use these same lift commands to do unit transportation without getting near enemies, in which case you refer to it a bit differently. It's just sea transport or ferrying, where you're just moving units where you want. But because we're going into enemy airspace, and that's kind of that's a whole mechanic we can get into. We're going to have some danger as we go to drop these guys off. So that's a really key element we're going to have to look at. There is danger, and if we lose some of these units, well, our attack on Copenhagen is going to go very poorly. Now, the concept of airspace, just to speak very quickly to it, around units or cities that are in supply, you basically have an air, we'll say, zone of control, or an airspace control out to 5 hexes from a given unit. So assuming units are all kind of in a frontline space, you're going to project some air space out to 5 hexes away from you. If you don't have enemy units that are in supply and all that good stuff, then you are the only one projecting that air control, and it's your friendly airspace. If your opponent has that control and you don't, then it's obviously enemy airspace. And then wherever it overlaps, which you can imagine is going to be a pretty big band of hexes around the front lines, that's considered contested. So how this relates to our interception, basically we're going to be trying to land those units. We're going to roll on the Warsaw Pact interception table, and we're going to see, okay, are we doing ferry and friendly airspace? No. Are we doing transport in contested airspace? No. Instead, we're doing a Warsaw Pact transport in enemy airspace, which is that third column. We are playing the surprise scenario, technically speaking. So this BALTAP, Baltic approaches, is from the strategic surprise scenario, and it's game turn 1. So our value there is a 4. What we're going to be doing is rolling a 2d6 and hoping that we don't get a 4. And it's going to be worse for these guys because there will be a die roll modifier for going into the Zoc of those Danish units there to the west of where we're landing our paratroopers. So regardless of being air or sea, this process is still pretty much the same. Subtracting 1 from the die roll if either the starting hex or destination hex is in an enemy Zoc. Yeah, so because cities don't project Zocs, we won't have to worry about that -1 for the Marine units, which is going to be helpful, hopefully, for our HQ to deploy. Yeah. If the modified die roll is equal to or less than the interception value, the moving step is eliminated along with the lift command. Now, in a shorter scenario like this, not a huge deal, but you can imagine in a full campaign, if you start losing your actual lift commands, the actual plane markers and whatnot, over the life of the rest of the big campaign scenario, you're not going to have that capability anymore. So if you have bad die rolls early, that's going to affect you through the rest of the campaign. Here, well, we're just going to have to hope for the best, and we'll do the rolls for all 6 stacks effectively here, just knowing that when we roll for these guys, again, we're going to roll a -1. And since it is equal to or less than, so you can imagine, on 2d6, the average result is a 7, so we actually are, there's a pretty good chance all of our guys are going to be fine. That -1 is a problem. That starts to cut in our standard deviation from the 7 or the 6s that we're going to want. So you can kind of work that out on the bell curve, what it's going to take for us to fail here, but we're going to have a pretty good chance of succeeding without much pain. All right, so I'm going to do the die rolls now. I'm just using the dice that came with the game in one of my dice trays here, just setting it out of the way. So we're just going to go from left to right, the top row. So no -1 on this one, I don't believe, because we're not landing in a zone of control. We don't want 4. So for the HQ, which is first and arguably the most important maybe for the moment, is an 8, so he's fine. The next unit is a 9, he's fine, and the third unit, an 11, he's fine. So all of these guys are going to get to land just safely as can be. Now we're going to go for the paratroopers. And again, this is a -1 to the die roll, so ideally we don't lose anything here either, but I've been rolling pretty well, so we'll see. Okay, so that's a 6, -1 is a 5. That's still okay. Second unit, middle one of the paratroopers. Okay, that is actually a 4, -1 is a 3. So this guy is gone. So we'll simply remove them. We'll put them in a dead pile. That includes the plane, the lift command, and then the final unit got a 10, -1, a 9. He's fine. So these guys will land thusly, and so that is the remainder of that. So with that complete, I believe those guys, the lift commands, will then return to the recovery boxes, I believe. Um, yeah, recovery box. Okay, so these guys will go back to the recovery boxes. They are all used up for the rest of this turn, but we did pretty good, right? We only lost one unit, um, and importantly, we managed to get the HQ, which will help the pay off dividends a little later. So that much is over. So that has gone pretty reasonably well, and I'm pretty happy with that. That's some goodness. Um, yeah, that's great. Okay, so now we got to start looking at the ground movement, which is back down here, where kind of the main frontage and action is. Okay, so for the ground movement that we need to finish doing here, I'm trying to think what I want to do. Because so much of this becomes about whether or not we're going to successfully be able to do all the things I'd like to do. So when we do movement, right, each unit has its own set of movement factors, I should say. And what I'd really like to be able to do is um, eliminate as many of these German units as I can, because I want to leave them with less defenders overall. So if I can break into hit the HQ and kind of knock him out a couple of turns, that would be of great value to me. If I can eliminate these guys, that would be good. I don't want this guy operating in our backfield necessarily, so I need to remove him. So the order of operations starts to get trickier as we look at it. The other thing I have to be careful of is when we look at the cities. Well, most of our units here are that at least could get out this far are armor, and armor is halved going into cities. So I can take some. I mean, I would maybe describe it as risky gambits here and try to knock out the HQ, which is kind of dangerous, to be honest. But it feels a bit worth it. And then I think I want to try to knock these guys out with everything I've got, and then I would like to leave this guy as a reserve, so I can kind of throw him out ahead and ideally get across a river line or something if I could make it. I'm not sure I could. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, I guess I likely wouldn't be able to get over the river line unless I took the city. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, this is all it's all tricky, guys. I'm not sure what I want to do here. But we're gonna have to do something. So I'm gonna experiment with the mechanics here a little bit. I think I do want to put a operational marker down. I've got to find one first. Here we go. OMG. So I want to put an OMG marker on this guy, I think. I think. And what I may actually want to do, okay. So I don't have to do that right now. So this is the stuff I'm talking about, guys. It gets tricky. So what I think I want to do, I think I'm gonna get a little ballsy, because we got away pretty good with the Copenhagen drop. We're gonna move this guy here, so that's 1, 2, 3, and then this guy's gonna go 4, 5, 6. 1 to leave a Zoc, 1 to enter, and then 1 for the hex itself. So we're kind of extended out like that. And then I want to move this guy over just the 1. And then I'm going to have this guy move over for 1, 2. And then I'm going to stick that. Oh, wait. I don't think I can do that. Darn it. So the thing with the OMG marker. It's not disrupted. It does not end its movement in an EZOC. Yeah, that's my problem. Okay. Well, I'll put. Let's see if I can do this any other way. I could do it. Mm, do that and then stick OMG marker. I should have just started them there, right? You would think that'd be smart. Either way, I think that'll work. Yeah, I'm screwing this up a little bit, guys. I'm trying to think. I want to use it so we could try to get through territory, because I'd like to make it so that these East German defenders can't defend very well. That's the goal. I think that's the movement that we want. I can't move this HQ, unable to be moved. But then these guys, everything else, I think is going to be as good as it gets. So that is our movement. Now here's the helicopter move, and unfortunately, I don't know that I can now would be a good time to try something. But what I want to do, I just think is going to be too risky. Because what I'd like to do is get a concentric attack on this hex and try to just take it outright. But we're going to need to do a helicopter drop, I guess, to take care of that. And I don't see it likely that we're going to end up succeeding. Helicopter movement. Okay. Helicopter transport. So what we do have, what I'm trying to do is use this guy here, this extra brigade that we have in our strategic reserve. I'm hoping I can actually get him going, but he's in our strategic reserve. So if I have that right, 37th, yeah, 37th, he's falling units in the strategic reserve, blah, 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 blah. And to start an insertion operation, helicopter command is removed from the ready box, placed on top of its intended passenger unit. Yeah, this is going to be a problem. Okay, so as it happens, we can't use helicopter movement to move a unit from the strategic reserve box to the map. So instead, we can use air ferrying, which does not use a lift command so long as we stay in friendly airspace, to move the 37th Air Brigade here out of the strategic reserve box. I'm putting them in East Berlin, way in a safe zone, and the expectation here that we'll eventually use those guys with helicopter movement. But just the way the scenario is written, we don't have access to that unit right away. And that does it for movement, I think. Everyone's kind of gotten where we need to be. We're pretty well set up for the assault at Copenhagen. We've surged through the lines of the East Germans there for our combats. So I think we're set. After movement is complete, we would have the recovery phase for the Warsaw Pact, which we don't have much to do here. If there were disrupted markers or out of supply markers, we would maybe check to remove them at the moment, but we don't need to do that. Now we have the Warsaw Pact battle planning phase. This is something that just the Warsaw Pact has because of their inflexible command structure. Basically, we have to mark out where we're going to have combats, and then hell or high water, there's going to be a resolution. And we have to do this before we do any of our strikes, nuclear, chemical, air, or artillery, and before any other sort of reactions occur. So what could happen is maybe our strikes miss, we don't do very well, and we're put in a position where maybe we don't actually want that battle to go through, but we're going to have to. So we have to commit, we have to decide what we're going to do right now. And I mean, obviously, we're going to have a battle up there. There's going to be a battle on these guys. And then I am going to go for that HQ there. So 3 combats, some of them ill-advised, but hey, this is just a training scenario, and it's not a very long one, so I feel like I can kind of be risky and do goofy things. There's some other benefits that the Warsaw Pact is going to have here when we get to the offensive strike phase that feels a little cheaty. So in this scenario, you in fact do have chemical munitions. So if you want to use chemical weapons, you have to make sure you have chemical munitions. The Warsaw Pact does start with 3 for the scenario, and we can basically use 1 a turn, I think. And if we were to do this in a campaign game, it would be probably not a good idea, because once you start chemical warfare, the NATO player is going to get victory points every turn that chemical warfare goes on. So the earlier you start it, the worse it is for you. However, though you may have more access to the capability for longer, you're really paying a steep victory point penalty. But in this scenario, victory is only counted in terms of conquering Denmark. So there's really no con, as best as I can tell, for using chemical weapons. Like, there's just not. I should just do them. In a campaign game, same turn 1, same situation, I definitely would not use it. So I'm only using it because right now it's not really going to cost me anything. There's no reason not to do it. So I do feel like there should maybe be some cost to it. Like, if you start chemical warfare, you have to take an additional Danish city or something, but that's not what the scenario says, so we're not going to play it that way. We're just going to have the Warsaw Pact get this straight up bonus that we can start chemical warfare on turn 1 and use it. As best as I can tell, there is nothing that is going to keep us from doing it. So we're going to do that. So as we finish the recovery phase, as we finish our battle planning phase, we know the 3 locations where we're going to have specific combats and attacks. So we will have to do that. And yeah, so let's talk about that. Now, with the this next phase here is the offensive strike phase, which means we're going to do all our relevant strike capability activities now. The first is nuclear strike segment. So have to ask, are we going to be doing any nuclear strikes? No, of course not. We don't have, I don't think we have the capability to. I don't know, but that would be silly. We're not going to do that. That'd be even more silly than me using chemical weapons at this point, but we're going to go ahead and do that. So no nuclear strike, but now we have the chemical strike segment. And it has to be if we have initiated chemical warfare, and I'm going to go ahead and say that that we are going to use chemical warfare, for better or for worse. Now, here's the thought about where we're going to use it. There are different ways that we could choose to use this, but my thought is I would like to do it against the unit in Lubeck so that we have a decent chance of getting them off our plate, so to speak. I don't want to have to worry about this unit bothering us later down the line. So that's kind of my thinking. So what we would do here to actually perform the strike, we've got to make our designation, and this is via a tactical deployment. We have tactical chemical warfare, which means we have to do it using our army and front level assets against hexes in friendly or contested airspace. Well, it is contested airspace. That's certainly the case. And then as we're looking at this, the execution. For each chemical strike, you first expend a munitions point. I'm doing that off the track on the side of the map. Um, and the chemical strike, place our markers. So we're going to put this marker right here, like so. That is a persistent gas marker. So we're deploying that. Chemical strikes affect every unit in the target hex. To resolve a chemical strike, the striking player consults the chemical strike table, determines the column for the current turn of chemical warfare, and rolls the die. Of course, I need to find the right player chart somewhere. Yeah, there it is. All right. Chemical strike table. First turn of chemical warfare. So we're going to use that first column there. We announce which strike is being attacked. We're going to roll a die. Do we get any die roll modifiers? +1 to Warsaw Pact strikes on the first turn of war if surprise applies. Well, surprise does apply. So ideally, we're going to roll a 5 or a 6, and that will destroy that German unit, or at the very least, will disrupt them. So rolling, hoping for a 5 or a 6. We got a 5. So 5 plus 1 is 6, a D1, eliminate one step. I'm reasonably confident this guy is toast. He is toast. So that was kind of a coup victory there, because that was a decently strong unit. He's done. And we've now put some persistent gas over that city. And I'm probably going to forget to worry about removing that marker or rolling for it. That marker will stick around for a while. It'll make it hard to move into and through. I mostly just did that because it was effectively an extra strike that I could use to remove that unit, and sure enough, it worked. So I got pretty much everything I wanted out of that. Now, there would be, I should point out, some pretty significant victory point costs to gassing a city. just throwing that out there. Ordinarily, there would be. Each player would receive a victory point award every time his opponent makes a chemical strike on a friendly controlled city. But again, in this scenario, we're not counting victory points. We're counting whether or not Denmark has surrendered. So we do not care about victory points, which means gassing a city is not going to cost us. So we're going to do that. That is what we did. Oof, guys, real oof. Okay, so we're done with that. Now we are done with our chemical strikes. So that segment is complete. Now we're going to deal with the airstrike segment, and then we would also have an artillery strike segment. We don't have any on-map artillery units, so we don't need to worry about that, which means all that's left in the offensive strike phase is our airstrike. We have basically one air point to use every turn, except at the beginning of a turn, we can say we're going to get 2. I didn't do that. Maybe I should have, but I'm just saying, okay, we've got one airstrike at our disposal right now. I do think I would want to hit either here. I think I just have to hit here. There's no point in trying to airstrike the HQ, I don't think, because there's just nothing. I don't think it'll do anything. It would suppress the HQ, but I'm not worried about suppressing the HQ. I want to disrupt units. So I think that means we're going to focus effort on trying to disrupt these guys. That's the goal. So yeah, we're going to do an airstrike there. I think that is what we want. So we're going to spend our tactical air point to perform an airstrike against enemy units. Because we only have the one shot, it doesn't matter here, but you would normally use an airstrike marker to denote where you're going to do your strike before you resolve any of them. Obviously, and I'm not sure I'm using the right marker for this, but we're going to be going here, right there. That might not be the right marker. That's a criticism I'm going to have of this game. I don't think the markers are very well differentiated, and that's kind of annoying. But anyway, we're gonna do that here, right? Boom, boom, airstrike, airstrike. It is. Um, all right, so declares which unit or units the strike will target. Okay, right. So each point spent is going to affect um, gosh. Each air point is good for a airstrike on up to 2 target steps and 1 target hex. Well, the German units here are each 1 steppers, so our 1 point will hit both units. But the results can only be as bad as getting that D1 result where we eliminate at least the 1 unit. So this isn't as dangerous as you might think. But let's see, 1 artillery point, great. We're using our strike table here. It's a little hard to find, but it's on the player aid sheet. Strike table. Let's see. Die roll modifiers. Well, there's several here that could apply, but most will not. This is not a major key city. They're out in the open. Not fortified, not in any special hexes. It is contested airspace. We don't get a whole lot, but we do get a +1 for surprise on turn 1. So we still get that +1, same as we did for chemical. And so let's see what we get. We want a 4, 5, or 6 would be ideal. 4, 5, or 6 at this point. So let's hope for the best. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that we could be doing right now that would help us. I don't think so. So yeah, 4, 5, or 6 rolling. Unfortunately, I only rolled a 2. +1 is a 3, which is a disrupt result. Oh, okay. I have to see. I assume it affects both. Okay, yeah, we're going to put a disrupted marker. Now, here's the thing. What is the right way to display this? I don't know. These guys are disrupted like this. Is that the right marker with the NATO symbol on it? I don't know. I'm a little disappointed because all we really needed were markers that have the word disrupted on them. And instead we have some weird amalgamation of like explosion pictures. But there's several of those in the game and they mean different things, gosh darn it. So maybe I should be using, like one of these markers. I don't think so. I think this is the marker that's supposed to be used for disruption, but it is not as clear as I think it ought to be. So that's going to be one knock against the game, but probably the only one of any substance that I've encountered so far. So, okay, that was our airstrike. So we successfully disrupted those German units that are about to get concentric attacked by the rest of our forces here. So we are done with the offensive strike phase, and now we get into the actual combat phase. Very exciting. Okay, now for our combats, first thing we're going to do is going to be pick one to go through the battle cycle. And I think I want to start things off with Copenhagen. So we have 4 combat strength in this hex. We have 6 more. The HQ doesn't actually provide combat factors there, so it's 2 value in parentheses as its support range. So we functionally have 10 combat factors attacking 2, which is the intrinsic organic strength of the city here. And you can imagine that starts at 5-to-1 odds. Now, so here's the deal, though. I have a decision to make as the NATO player. So we have the commitment segment. We're committing our forces. Those are all the units that are going to be involved in the combat. Now, what that is going to do for us is move us into the NATO reaction segment. Now, we can't react into Copenhagen because there are no units actually adjacent to slide over. So we don't really have a choice here to be able to react into the city. We do, however, have the NATO defensive strike segment, and I believe we can still do a defensive strike even with the surprise. I should double check that to make sure that that's the case, but I'm reasonably confident that it is. Somewhere, surprise, where's the surprise rules? Gosh darn it. Okay, all Warsaw Pact ground attacks receive 1 column to the right. No, that's good. Yeah, we already did the die roll. Okay, so that doesn't matter. But we will get a column shift to the right, which is actually really important. Very important for us. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Okay. So next we would look at, do we do NATO defensive strikes? So I think we would want to try, honestly. So I think we're gonna do that. So NATO has one tactical air point to use. The ability to use it, we need to make sure we have the air capability to do it. I believe that is the case. We are in our friendly air territory, friendly airspace to do it. So this works pretty much the same way as other strike activities. The question is, where do we want to do it? I think it makes the most sense to try and knock out the Marines with an airstrike, because if they are halved by being disrupted, I'm trying to think, 6 down to 3, or it would come out to be, yeah, 6 going to 3. That would remove 3 combat factors, where we could only remove 2 combat factors from that stack. So I think that's the move. So yeah, we're going to use our air point for that purpose, and we're going to do a defensive airstrike. See if there's anything else I can do to try to shift this. We'll do it on that northern hex, and the 1 strike is going to be affecting those 2 Marine units. We have an artillery. This is in friendly airspace, because these units that are coming into Denmark are not considered supplied right now. I don't believe. Yeah, I think we can just hit them. So we're going to roll a die. We want 4 5s or 6s, I believe. And yeah, we got the 6. So this is really interesting. So we're going to do the strike. This unit is removed. So he's just straight up destroyed. And then we're going to get, and again, I don't know what marker should be used for this, but we're going to put the disrupted marker here. And then we'll also know, I'm not going to fish around for the exact counter because it's straightforward enough to me. The Baltic Core HQ, oh, I'm sorry, no, the Baltic HQ should not be affected. It's just the units. He is disrupted. So not only did we eliminate a unit, we have also disrupted one of the attackers. So I can't say that it could have. I think that was the best result we could have hoped for. And now we need to understand: do we have any attack helicopters? And right now, I don't know that we do. I don't think we have any attack helicopters on the map. So I think that's done. And then we actually have the final combat odds calculation for the attack on Copenhagen. And so this is where things are going to get a little tricky. So now we have 1.5 and 4. So, wow, that's just not good. 5.5 rounds down to 5. 5 to 2 is 2 to 1 to start with. Boy, that's going to be tricky. So as we're looking at this, it starts at 2 to 1. There's 2 shifts to the left because of the major city, but then 2 shifts to the right for the concentric attack because we're attacking from basically all the hex sides are covered with no adjacency to friendlies for the NATO city. So we get a +2. So that just puts us right back at 2 to 1. And then I believe we get a shift to the right for surprise. So that would bring us to 3 to 1, which things are not looking good already. Now we made a big show of using our air point to defend Copenhagen because that did seem like the best place to utilize it, but it's also the only place that we're going to be able to utilize air this turn. We won't be able to use any on offense. Not that I expect to be doing a lot of offensive moves right now. So 1 column shift to the right on the CRT. Yeah, okay. So 3 to 1 odds. Most of these results are going to be not terribly good. Yeesh. We can't use a HQ support because the Baltic Core HQ up there, he's really only good for supply. He's not big enough to provide shifts. So that's too bad. And yeah, boy, I think that's it. So we're going to roll the die on the 3 to 1 and see what we get. And we roll a 1, which is just about the worst result that we could imagine getting right now. So this is an attacker loses 1, and we're just going to go ahead and pick this loss. Now the person who is receiving the loss doesn't get to pick the loss. Your opponent does. So we're going to choose now to eliminate these guys. So now this HQ is kind of by itself, and the supply situation here suddenly gets a lot harder to contemplate. And really, like I've seen in other examples, the assault on Copenhagen has just gone very poorly. And yeah, that's not great. Not great for the show. That could be the whole scenario right there. Just went up in flames. So that battle's over. Not great. Not great. Next, I think we're going to do this one just because I think it should be a little more straightforward. Um, so these guys have been disrupted. So altogether, they have a defense of 3. We're attacking with 1, 2, 10, 18, and then another 6 is 24. And then do what? Can I, well, um, 24 to 3. It's pretty good odds. Um, without throwing support in, it's already 8 to 1 with the shift to the right for surprise to be 9 to 1. So we're going to go ahead and just roll it. It should just totally destroy these guys, I would think. So I don't think there's anything else I could have done. Maybe I shouldn't have moved those guys up like that. That was poor planning on my part. And we roll a 6. So yeah, these guys are toast. Both are toast. And if any survivors would have been left, they would have been disrupted, and there's retreats, but we don't need to worry about the retreats so much. And then I believe this counts as a breakthrough zone, and so we can actually move up even more so. So let me validate that. So that went better, but I mean, we had every advantage at that point. Now, could we have stopped much by ground striking there? I don't think it would have been able to make a huge difference if we had maybe disrupted some of those units. But we'll see. I could be wrong about that and end up paying for it. All the enemy units were eliminated. Goodness. All right, we can move 1 hex further if units are hard. Must not be disrupted. Yeah, that's going to be pretty much everybody. But no, whether it advances 1 hex or 2 may never end its movement in a hex containing more than 2 steps, including itself. So really, we would say we're going to do, yeah, those are 2-step units. Bop like that, and we could do like that, I guess. That would be, I don't really need that marker, actually. And this guy's already taking up a hex, so I can't really, it does me no good. So the exploit wasn't as good as maybe I would have wanted it to be. If no defending units, yeah, so we would have this marker here. This represents a breakthrough zone. And during the friendly reserve phase, hard units executing tactical movement may ignore Ezocs in the breakthrough zone, allowing them to punch through the hole that was created when the breakthrough marker was first placed. Breakthrough zones do not negate Ezocs for any purpose except ground movement. Yeah, okay. Well, there's no Zocs here as it is, so I don't really need the marker there. But good to know. And then finally, and boy, this is probably the combat I shouldn't have aimed for. So these guys are done. Move these out of the way. We have this final combat, which is very ill-advised. So we have this combat against this HQ here, and we have 10 factors, but they are halved going into a city. So this was done to some degree. It was done. We'll see how it works out. Um, were halved, I believe. Um, Boy, that's just too bad, isn't it? Okay, so for this final combat here against the HQ, as it stands right now, it is 5, so the attack factor of this armor unit 10 halved to 5 against 2. So we have the organic strength of the city of 1 and then the provisional strength of the HQ of 2. So 5 to 2 would be, unfortunately, only 2 to 1. And then we have a shift uh, for a minor city. So that would take it to 1 to 1. Surprise gives us back up to 2 to 1. And I'm looking to see, can I get anything else? And we can get offensive support from this HQ. 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes away. That is in range of the HQ. So we get another shift. That gets us up to 3 to 1. This is not really what I wanted. I wanted something better than this. And unfortunately, I just can't seem to squeeze any other factors out of this attack, which means we could eat crap is what's going to happen. So rolling the die on 3 to 1 odds. Should have done something else. Should have done something better. But if I can knock out all these German units and send this HQ off map for a turn or two, like that would be valuable to me. So we're going to give it a shot. Rolling the die. All right, we rolled reasonably well. We rolled a 5, which is a D1 R1. So we got lucky. Let's see. Defender rolls on the counterattack table. Okay. 2, 5, 6. I was wondering if the city actually even gets one. I'm not sure that it does. 2, 5, 6, 2. Counterattack. So the counterattack involves the defending steps possibly being able to inflict a disruption result on somebody. Da, 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 da. Okay. I guess an HQ is a maneuver unit, isn't it? It's small things that get you. Oh, no, they don't. So an HQ is not a maneuver unit. So there are no defending maneuver units in the hex. So there is no counterattack. They take the step loss. So we do actually take the hex. So we're going to take this guy off. Now there is reconstitution. So when an HQ gets shut down like that, they are not permanently eliminated, but they do go on the turn track 2 turns from the current turn. So we won't see this come back until turn 3, basically. And that's a nice clean sweep here. And we're going to advance and we'll take control. And so we'll put a control marker on Kiel. And we did it. And I don't think we lost anything either, for that matter. 3 to 1, CR, or CA. But the counterattack doesn't work because none of the units are counterattack capable. D1 eliminates the defending unit. And let's see. Yeah, I want to say we took the city. Let me double check. Yeah, we don't have to actually inflict an additional step loss because we eliminated all the units. we can advance and we conquer the city. And thankfully, we got very lucky that armor unit remains unharmed, which is probably the most important part of this. Now, all of our combats are complete, so that is done. And now we have the reserve phase, which again, I don't think this really did any good for us. But I'm going to remove this guy. So now he's released. He can move three hexes. 1, 2, 3. Yay. And maybe I could do that a little bit. Maybe I stick him over here. I don't know. Does that do us any good, any different? I couldn't tell you. Okay, so we're done. We're done with that, and I think that is the end of the Soviet turn, if I'm not mistaken. So let's think about this very quickly in terms of what we've accomplished here, right? We have failed to take Copenhagen. In fact, we've suffered devastating losses to our Marines that we're not going to get back. Catastrophically bad, you could say. Despite mostly landing unhindered, we just could not take the city. It wasn't enough. We rolled crap, and that was it. We're out of gas in the north, which kind of means, unless we get some Hail Mary attempt at Copenhagen, which we could still try to do. I mean, it's feasible. We could try again. I'm willing to give it a shot, but it's going to get harder and harder. We could still keep trying, but otherwise we're going to have to take the four other minor cities in Denmark. And in the south, the Soviets are doing very, very well. They've totally eviscerated the East German defense line and used chemical weapons to boot, and basically have an open path to just start running up the neck of Denmark, though the territorials are going to start to come in for NATO here very shortly. So kind of a real mixed bag for that first turn, right? We didn't get where we wanted to be, but we've done extraordinarily well in the south. We've got a lot of opportunity to advance with our units unharmed, all of our units capable of rushing forward and beginning to chip away at the NATO defenders. So it could have gone better, but I'm reasonably pleased with the result. Checking my time here, this is a lot of video, as you undoubtedly can tell, having watched it, if you did. I think I'm going to close this video here. So this is, Warsaw Pact turn 1. We're going to do the NATO turn 1, the NATO half of turn 1 in the next video, and probably do a lot of turn 2 in the next video. I wanted to kind of slowly work my way through this just so folks could actually see things play out. I took some big gambles here, but now it's looking like maybe that'll pay off. In one space, it totally has failed in the other, and I really thought I was going to have it. I thought we had a pretty reasonable chance of success, and well, the dice can be fickle. So we're going to save the NATO response, however short it will actually be. Probably won't take very long to play through NATO turn 1. We're going to do that, probably all of turn 2 in the next video, but hopefully that gave you a quick taste. Tried to explain my thought process as we went through it, and maybe I could have done things more efficiently, but we got fortunate on some of the die rolls. We'll keep it rolling into the next one. So thanks for watching. Take care. We'll see you in the next one, guys. Keep gaming. Catch you later.